I always call them input and output days, is how I like work my life in the sense, or even like input and output hours. Like I'm trying to write an idea down for a film or for a story, and it's not happening. And I'm like, this is not an output day, it's an input day. Like, what can I research around this topic or watch or read or feel that I then can go back to it and have like food to then put into this, piece of work.
Yeah.
And so knowing that and being soft onto myself when making that decision, and it's not a failure that no story happened today.
Welcome to Soundfood, an open, intersectional dialogue on nourishment of all mediums, inviting the inquiry, what is sound, and how do we find and feel resonance today? Welcome to our second episode of Soundfood. Here I sit down with my dear friend Bonnie Wright. She is an amazingly multi-talented and awake human being who also happens to be one of my hands-down favorite people to cook and eat with. I had the pleasure of having her stay with me recently in the middle of a snowstorm, which was totally unexpected. It's a little bit bootstrapped, the kitchen over here. I'm waiting for this new stove to arrive. So we were cooking off of a little electric plug-in burner and a toaster oven. Even so, we were able to whip up a feast of roasted veggies, anasazi beans, quinoa, greens, and we hunkered down by the fire and had some natural wine. And it was really cozy and sweet. It was a feast. Bonnie has this ability to make the simplest foods taste divine, and she just brings this really sweet, mellow, yet playful energy into the kitchen and into really any space. It feels really, really good to be around. She's also a total whiz at baking. We'll get into that more in the episode. But yeah, that would be what's nourishing and healing me right now, is cooking and dining with friends. The best medicine. Also, I should mention I finally unpacked my stainless steel pots and Japanese knives from Material Kitchen, which I dare say has been quite gratifying. Being able to cut and simmer my vegetables properly, it makes all the difference. So shout out to Material Kitchen. And without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome, Bonnie Wright.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. So Bonnie, you wear many hats, but you are a film director, amazing film director. You are the founder of Wastewatch, which is an awesome organization. I'd love for you to expand on more.
Yeah, I'd love that.
And also a Greenpeace ocean ambassador. So you're doing a lot of amazing work in the world. We met when you were living in New York.
Yeah, that must have been now like 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah,
I think at least 5 years ago. Yeah, but now you're based out of California.
Yeah.
Which I'm so grateful. Now yes. I almost forget, except the accent sometimes.
I'm
other
like,
life. Oh yeah, right.
But it does feel like another life. Yeah.
But how did you get here now? Your childhood and sort of the important life moments and pivots that have brought you to California and to this point in space and time in the mountains.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm from London, and I guess, where do I even begin? I mean, I guess I had a pretty sort of cosmopolitan kind of city childhood. My parents are jewelry designers and, very kind of curious for learning and for culture and for sort of, I guess, just knowledge, really. That was always such a big part of our life, that, the knowledge and understanding of something really gives you power in a way that, often at times you can feel quite powerless when you're trying to grasp a thing. So that foundation of learning and honing my craft was something I really had respect for, because I saw how much work that they had put into it and what a physical ability they had as jewelry makers and designers.
Oh my gosh, so much, details and precision. And
and a kind of, a look toward the past and the processes that have been here forever, and really respecting and understanding them, same as the materials, where they've come from, how they got into your hands, like what's the history behind the Bronze Age, or why you're using silver.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And then how you take that into a kind of what spin they were putting onto it, and what designs they brought to it, but also just like pushing processes and materials was always something that they were like learning and doing. And then I have an older brother, Lewis, and he is also an artist, a fine artist. He does a lot of things in kind of both sculptural things, but then also a lot of film work too, in a kind of 3D rendered sort of worlds. And he's really interested in kind of creating worlds, essentially, which I guess I am too with my film work. But I've always really looked up to his, again, attention to detail and kind of real space that he loves to sort of like go to in his imagination and tries to create in his work. And so I was really fortunate to have both parents and a brother that gave me so much kind of inspiration and creative grounding that always like pushed me. Like we're always have each other to sort of talk about our ideas with, and the dinner tables were always like really interesting. And so that was my sort of childhood. And then when I was 9 years old, I kind of thrown into the industry of film by being cast in Harry Potter films, and I was just exposed. And
wow, you were 9?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I feel like in hindsight,
did you want to act?
I don't think I knew what I wanted to do. I was, each day was like something new.
Yeah.
I think the beauty of, sorry if anyone hears that, it's my dog in the background, Billy. He'll settle soon. And yeah, I guess I didn't know what the innocence that I kind of brought to that, and the kind of naivety and the sort of just pure love for taking part that I so was at that age actually saved me, I think, because it meant that I kept that alive, I think, throughout. And I think that was the same goes for everyone, really.
Yeah.
And just in the sense that, I wasn't self-conscious of my body, and I wasn't, it was already before puberty. It was, just like doing things and taking part and just showing up. And, the more and more experiences we have, the more tainted we are at how we show up, because we're like second guessing ourselves or we're beginning to judge ourselves or others. So I felt like it was this amazing way to just like fully be present. And, obviously there was the evolution through 10 years of that experience followed my, teenage years and these huge influential years. So it's one of those things, like when people ask the impact it's had on my life, like who's to know, because all I've ever lived is my life. So I don't know. But it's been really interesting and a continual journey through reflection post that experience of like its significance, really, and how it's continued to show up in my life, and how grateful I am that it became the building blocks of now a kind of job on the other side of the camera that I love. And, I wouldn't have even probably known about it if I hadn't have really been exposed to filmmaking again at its like real craft, like in the same way I grew up with my parents being really good at what they did. On those film sets, it was these incredible filmmakers. I mean, every single person in every department was like the best at what they were doing, whether it's props or sets or cinematography and that was amazing to experience it. So that then got me to when I decided to study. I went to film school. When I went to college, I kind of loved that. I really loved suddenly being back around my contemporaries. Like I could have easily, I guess, not gone to college and just had a career in film that I was already in.
But you immersed yourself back to the craft.
Yeah,
that's
again,
so
yeah.
awesome.
And also I just think, if you can go and college feels right for you, or some type of studying doesn't necessarily have to be a college environment. I think there is kind of a rite of passage, I think, that you find from just like diligently doing something that you are really cool to do around other people who are also like-mindedly cool to do that. I think just to kind of ignite a fire and to have contemporaries to make work with. I think when people often ask me like, oh, I really want to, even young kids will be like, oh, I really want to act or I want to make films. What should I do? And I'm always like, find someone else that wants to do that too and do it with them.
Oh, cool.
Because I think
Find
so
your
much,
community.
until you can collaborate, you know, there's only so much like acting to a wall or making home videos you can do. I think you really need each other. So I think that was really what my degree ended up being for me, just contemporaries. And then a couple of years after I graduated, I moved to New York. And by that time, I guess I had made a few short films, a music video, but I was still acting at that time. So I was still continued to kind of do both. Because I think we live in this time now where it's pretty normal to have multiple careers and everything, which is great that we have that. And I think we just have these bigger lives, literally longer lives. And I think now we have chapters.
Now maybe shorter lives.
Yeah, maybe we're bouncing back.
We'll see about that.
But, you know, other people would, you know, you'd have one thing and that's what you were committing to. And so what pulled me away from acting was I really wanted to give the directing a go and figure out if it was something that I truly wanted to do or it was something that I loved to study and I have respect for, but actually like maybe I'm not capable of it. And it takes like a lot, and it took a long time to say to myself, like, I'm a director, like to even sit in that, to call myself that and sit in that position was, you know, hard. And so it should have been, you know. Luckily, I didn't get too like worried or bogged down if I'd get judged because of my past and why I ended up in the kind of fortunate positions I would end up with making some of my projects. But it was more for me, honestly, just me like being like stop splitting my kind of attention to two and just really like give the full focus to the directing and stop kind of putting myself up and auditioning and reading for scripts and doing things. And the minute I did that, it was like pure, like it was so clear. It was like plain sailing, and suddenly there was like wind and I was, you know, off I was going and everything was smooth, and I was just instantly so much happier. I feel like there was so much wrapped up with identity with it all that was really interesting to go through, but it was very much about, you know, seeing something through and continuing in this career of acting just because it kind of fell into my lap as a kid. But it doesn't really mean that it has anything to do with who I want to be now.
In your future. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, and I just, at that time, I was just so ready to not be front-facing to the world, and still now. Like, I just love being behind a camera. Like, I just love that pressure of it's not, you know, however much, obviously, it's about character and story and emotion and feeling. At the end of the day, I think the industry, you know, got to a point where it was too much to me about kind of front-facing, like what you looked like, essentially. And I was so done with kind of being in front of the camera, really. And I just wanted to turn up in like scrappy clothes and be behind the camera and, you know, be building sets and help it. I just wanted to get my hands dirty, and there was not the tangibility and the physical kind of processes in acting that I enjoyed. And so I've just been doing that. And
what was your first project?
Yes, my first
out of school, I guess.
Because my graduation film that we did is like, I guess it's like your thesis kind of project. I took with the other people that I made that film with to the Cannes Film Festival in our like end of year of college.
God.
Like,
what a debut!
We handed in like our last paper, and all of us went and we stayed in this like one room in this you know, there was like 7 of us like on the floor at Cannes, like having the best time. Yeah, and it was just lovely to like be there all together and all manage to be there, you know, and share it together. My next short film after that, I filmed in upstate New York, which was just before I then lived in New York. And that was called Know Thyself. And that essentially, was about a young man processing the death of this older man that he was in love with. And it's just about loss, essentially. And him realizing that he can't sort of live in the shadow of this loss and this man, and that he needs to kind of be in his space and his age and kind of live on. And then whilst then I was in New York, I also did a web series called Phone Calls that I made with my friend Martin Cohn, and he wrote it and I directed it, and it was a really nice collaborative experience. It was the first time I'd worked in such before I'd written and directed, and it was really nice working with someone else's, dialogue and world. And we took that to Tribeca Film Festival, and we shot that all on 16mm again.
Oh, cool.
Which I'd shot my first short on. And we kind of wanted to subvert the sort of technical online world of web series by making it in film.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't make any sense, and like financially it's ridiculous, but it was great fun. And then since then I've done like lots of music videos for friends. I've done 2 for a friend of mine, Sophie Lowe, one in Joshua Tree, another one in the valley.
Oh, is that the one in the car?
Yeah, so there's one when she's like floating through a desert kind of scape.
Yeah.
And she's actually on a car, but you never see the car. And then the one I did with her last year.
In the bus.
That was on a bus, yeah.
Yeah, I love that one.
And then I did a video just literally around here actually with my other friend Gillian in December of last year in another moving car. I like things moving, processing, moving. But I didn't skip. So I moved to California 3 years ago with a 2-year stop in New York, which I really loved. It came at a time where I really needed some like fire and some wake up. So that really woke me up, took me out of my comfort zone. And I suddenly it was the first time I think moving away from London and the people I'd known forever and my family and like my identity there was the first time I suddenly was like, who actually am I? Because you're meeting people for the first time and they don't know anything about you. You could be anyone you want to be kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I suddenly began to it was quite a reflective experience really. And it was a nice way to feel like I didn't have to live in any story and I could just be present to like who I wanted to be. And I guess I always thought that sort of the access to nature and being by the beach was sort of a luxury and something that I did on the weekends. Like I grew up when we were younger and still do. My family have a house on the coast in England, but it was always somewhere you'd like go to read and do some work and write, and then you'd be back in the city. And so I guess I always sort of thought that about California. It was somewhere that like I enjoyed going to when I was doing the kind of nature stuff or for work. And then I was like, maybe I can live a life and have that too. And so it was I never thought I would move to LA, I guess. I was like, I don't understand it. I need to have
Did you come here when you were younger for work?
Yeah, I did when I guess the first time I came here was maybe when I was like 16, 17. I also looked at colleges in both New York and LA, but decided to stay in England. But I guess I came and found it a place really hard to visit, but it's great to live here. And I think New York is like really fun to visit.
I totally agree.
To live there, it's really difficult to sustain.
Well, I've never tried, but
my nervous system by the end of New York was like, woo, like it was too much.
After a week, I'm like, oh man, get me upstate or something.
Yes.
It's intense.
I think also I'd always been really used to like the minute things got too much, I would go away for work or I'd travel. And I was like, I need to live somewhere where I have no desire to go anywhere. And that's what California has been for me. Like my going somewhere, like every holiday, like vacation I've taken this year has been just going camping, like not even needing to get, on a plane to go to an incredible landscape to do that. So it's been, I've loved it. I've definitely like built a life that I really like here.
I mean, now you're like, like if you see her car right now, she's got her surfboard with
towels
her, like,
towels
drying. Like fully just like was like, I'm going to pop in the ocean. Yeah, I love that. Had you surfed before you moved here or did you really?
No, well, I guess a little bit when I was younger in Cornwall in England. Like I remember going when I was young. And then a little bit, my mum's side of the family all live in Australia. So sometimes, but never, it was like, once every 2 years.
Yeah, it wasn't.
So really when I moved here and sort of had that ability to, and still it's like a novel thing to me that I can surf and get back to my studio and work, and it's, and I can still like more and more I work, and the more I realize that like time is just a completely like malleable thing.
Oh, I love that.
Like it's so, I could have like 5 hours and get nothing done because I'm just like, clearly I'm not in the headspace to get anything out of my brain that's of any interest. And then, you like only have an hour that day because you decided to do a bunch of other things that are maybe not work related, but you're like, well, this hour is really important because I just
self-care.
made choices to do all these other things. And boom, you have these like great ideas and you get all these things down. So I think it's like being easy with yourself. I think it's like, I always call them input and output days is how I like work my life in the sense, or even like input and output hours. Like I'm trying to write an idea down for a film or for a story and it's not happening. And I'm like, this is not an output day. It's an input day. Like what can I research around this topic or watch or read or feel that I then can go back to it and have like food to then put into this, piece of work.
Yeah.
And so knowing that and being soft onto myself when making that decision, and it's not a failure that no story happened today.
I feel like every time I'm about to say a question, I'm like, this is a form of nourishment. You're obviously a filmmaker, obviously, an exceptional storyteller. Well, this is so great to hear. And I love that the input and output, and the input is like the taking that time and space to nourish yourself. And how did you realize this? Like, what were the different stepping stones? Because this really shows how self-aware and how your self-care has got you to this place of like being soft and being gentle with yourself. Like, what has been the nourishment to lead you to this like self-awareness and understanding?
Yeah, I think a lot of the softness has come from the extreme too. I think having certain parts of my life pushing an extreme, either just like my attitude towards work or like doing something or thinking I should like get ahead in a certain thing, or like I've got to have this done by this age, or haven't done this year, or those hardnesses that you put on yourself that kind of completely unhelpful to productivity and happiness and just joy and being present in like, why am I doing this if I'm just thinking about the achievements and not the process. And then I would say more in like my nourishment of knowing when they are input days, and if it's not input of knowledge and it's input of self-care. I think there have been moments where I've gone to extremes just because I've been trying to heal certain things in my life, or heal certain, whether or not they're like physical ailments, emotional kind of experiences, that I have then gone down a rabbit hole of like one path and kind of doing it too far, and realizing that actually like I'm way better when I don't set. I mean, I love boundaries, like maybe too much sometimes. But I realize where like boundaries can, for me, if they're just personal ones, I'm good with boundaries with like other people, and I'm proud of the boundaries I set. But I think for my own boundaries I set, I could completely be harmful in the sense of if I set myself strict rules, like goodbye, like no matter what I put in my body, it's going to be toxic. And I think that's been really interesting. It's the intention in which you go into something. If you're happy and you're having a great time and you just devour something that is quote unquote unhealthy, but you feel great and you have a great day and everything's fine because you felt happy and you were in joy and you had a good intention. If you go in like, oh my God, I shouldn't have this, well, your body's going to react in that way that it's not going to like it. So I think that's come from extremes, from just loosening the grip. I think like that is like a big thing that I'm always trying to tell myself. And like I'm still like loosening the grip. It's definitely not there. So yeah, it's just a process of moderation and just being mindful.
And then as a director, in a way, I can see how this would parallel your work as a director, because you have to be so, in a way, assertive. Or maybe you don't. I'm not in film.
Yeah, you do. And boundaries again. I mean, like bringing in creative, collaborative boundaries can serve you well and not, because you're coming in there and you need people to believe in your confidence and your vision because they want you to spearhead the journey you're all on together.
Right.
But at the same time, they need to be seen and heard as your collaborators. And if you don't see someone and you don't hear them,
and you don't allow them to show up.
Exactly. And who's to know that they haven't got a great thought to kind of completely crack open the project you're doing. So, but then also knowing that the minute you ask for that collaboration, invite it in, when do you kind of say, thank you very much, like, love that, but like, I'm going to take this
cut
and I'm going to do this, you know? So it's like,
yeah.
you're always kind of melding and meshing different things. And I think no matter what way you say, you know, and inhabit female, I think that general peripheral ability to kind of have a sensitivity towards like something's going wrong over there. I feel like the sound guy is like, or the girl, sorry, is not feeling happy. Like I feel like something went wrong in that take that she's not happy with. And you've got to feel that whilst trying to
orchestrate the rest.
And you've got to sense that and like know when to pull in and be sensitive and when to be like, that's her thing. She'll get over it. She'll do her job. I need to do this. So it's knowing when to like be open and receptive and knowing when to actually be a bit blinkered and like do what you've got to do. So I think that is an interesting, and I love that. It's such a, because I just love people and I love observing people, not only for stories and, you know, when working with actors, but like I'd love observing people that you're collaborating with and working with because they're feeding story and you, and, you know, you could see a mannerism that someone does like next to you and you suddenly want to put it into the story. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess that ease is something you also need with a director because I don't know, having also been directed, like as from an actor's perspective, like that has been so beneficial for me. Because
when a director understands that sort of like the balance and the ebb and flow of.
Yeah, exactly. And the language, it's such a specific, I mean, it just all goes back to communication, I think. I mean, it's all about communicating to your crew and your cast, and then at the end of the day, you're communicating a story through film. So that's always just really interesting, and how quick you can learn when there's a flow of communication.
There's so much I want to sort of dive into and wormhole on here. But I guess, well, one, always fun to ask because this is about nourishment of all forms. Is there one film specifically to you that's just like fills you up?
Oh, so hard.
And it can be like, you can even say like the top 3 that first pop into your mind.
Yeah. I guess when I was younger, I really liked Cinema Paradiso as well. Yeah. And I just feel like, again, I think I was so into like having reverence and respect for something through just like the environment in which I grew up. So I think just his like, his eyes watching cinema, just watching a child and the magic of cinema, I guess I've always been so interested in this idea that, you know, cinema began for illusions. Essentially it began as this like, oh my God, we just saw some moving image happen on screen because it was like magic to people, literally. Suddenly, you know, still imagery that was still and didn't have that surprise and that shock. And so I do always love that, and weirdly that kind of surprise and shock is kind of a reason why I actually really love the horror genre and sci-fi genre as and that weirdly is now a space that I'm like finding myself in with my first feature film project, essentially like a horror monster movie, which I never thought I'd find myself making. And it's always something that I just like loved because it transported me, and that's like as close as what I understand and feel as magic, to be suddenly like not my feet not on the ground and I'm suddenly in this other world. And so that I've taken a lot of inspiration from, and I'm surprised and excited that like now that's a genre I'm working in.
And is it have like this very strong like magical realism sort of feeling to it?
It's definitely very real. I mean, it's
real, or is it like all the way like sci-fi horror?
No, if only I had at this point all that budget to make a sci-fi movie. But no, it's funny. The script I was writing before was like so out there, like it was like real dystopian, like future sort of world, which is a story I haven't kind of put to bed and I will make. But I was like, you know what? I don't think for my first feature film, anyone is going to give me like $200-300 million to make a movie. Yeah. So I'll slow down and I like pause that. And I was like, okay, how do I explore these same themes, but like in a controlled small town way? So I was like, okay, sci-fi's got to wait, but monster movies and horror is generally a cheaper, more contained way and genre to tell a story through. So it's not, I mean, it's very much, it's set in Northern California in this town along a river, it's based, I mean, it's, who knows what we'll end up shooting, but it's based around the Russian River in Northern California.
I love that area.
Yeah, north of San Francisco. And so it's basically about this small town, and this monster comes to town, and the story is essentially about sort of what we're doing to our environment and our inability to sort of look beyond the repercussions of our behavior and to not think that it's going to come back and haunt us. And the monster, rather than the monster being nature reacting back to us, the monster is an extension of us, essentially. And to give this idea that we are the monster. Yeah. Which we are being monstrous. But yeah, so it's been really fun to mesh those worlds of my filmmaking and storytelling that has always been very kind of focused, character-based, like small sort of dramas, and bringing in my love for genre, and then bringing in my love and passion for the environment, and sort of like my interest and drive to best communicate that issue, in the sense of like we all consume film and stories all the time and very well. It's something that can really get to the core of people and really shift their outlook, their perspective, their heart, their empathy. So I'm really excited that I can kind of bring in, the environment world that often isn't communicated in a great way, and bring it into sort of storytelling, and also slight escapism, because it's kind of a fun monster movie. So it's not like you're watching a depressing documentary about the state of the world.
I love that.
You're like on a story, and at the end of the day, the characters are what you're there for. And like it just so happens that there's a moral message in it. So it's been fun to know that there are many ways to like communicate and like mesh the worlds of all my interests.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's such a need too, because how can we make this information, like this whole, environmental awareness that you're bringing into the film, but also make it nourishing and make it something that's fun or engaging? Because to be honest, sometimes, if I've had a long day, I just want to watch a beautiful film and sort of,
for sure. And also we're numb to things
and
now.
Not watch a heavy documentary. So I'm like,
and often that doesn't, like, we shut down, we shut out, we kind of lose our power. We're like, oh well, what can I do? This is like so extreme at this point, which it is, sadly, with the state of things. And it can be really kind of hard to feel inspired and feel powerful and not kind of just really disillusioned by it all. So it's been really good for me, even just my own processing of like trying to show up in the world in that way. And like, how do you show up in the world when like we're just such a small speck in one big cycle, you know, in terms of like literally the age of this planet. I mean, who are we really to think we're that significant? Right. And like giving into the cycle that we're a part of, I think is a big thing, which is morbid, but like also can release, the pressure to sort of, again, let go where we need to let go and take action where we need to take action. Because sometimes when people take action on something that's like just actually quite hard to digest, it can just end up being counterproductive and make people just run away. Totally. We all have people who are like so passionate about some things that we're like, oh gosh, please don't mention it because I don't know. It's the way in which we handle the crisis and the heaviness. Heaviness of it, and also just being, all we really can do is our own thing. Like all we can really do is live in reflection of like what we care about. And beyond that, like maybe you inspire someone you don't even know. I mean, I often think like, you could be walking down the street with a reusable something, or like something that you really enjoy and have made a choice because you believe that it is making a difference, your choice to do whatever, or whatever you're doing, and someone, you don't even see them see you, but they see you, and they might have thought, I've been meaning to buy one of those cups, or I've got one at home, I just keep forgetting it. Like, oh, she had one, like, oh, that, and then tomorrow maybe they remembered it. And like that in itself is like huge. The mycelia. Just to like, and you don't need to, your ego doesn't need to know that person like reminded themselves of their cup. I think just all these things, like all we can do is just like live and like hope that without even knowing, things begin to rub off in the same way that, you love people, you love yourself, you love things. Just that is like a feeling that's like, who knows where it goes, but it's never wasted. Yeah. In that like cycle of things, it's like, you might not get it bounced back to you straight away, but it's not like, I don't know, it's never wasted. I think that's a thing. It's like any action, small or large,
that's
just
such
goes
a
into
comforting,
a pot of like things.
Yeah, okay. So I kind of wanted to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty. We don't have to go.
Yeah.
No, you've just had this whole beautifully spiritual perspective about everything. But pulling it out of film, we had this interesting scenario where Bonnie and I went for a hike and we got back and we wanted to make a little snack before we sat down for the podcast. And I was pulling out my snackable items and I was like, you have this relationship to single-use plastic, which I thought that I'm pretty good. But then I was like, oh no, our like raw vegan nut cheese is like wrapped in plastic shrink wrap.
Yeah.
And I think one of the questions and I was like, oh no, I'll reuse this. Don't worry.
I'm like, will you?
Like, I'll reuse this. So how do you define a single-use plastic? And where do you personally, but also to help other people, where do you draw that boundary? Like,
sure. Okay, well, single-use plastics is something that has one singular use. So once you've used it to contain your food or a drink, it's now lost its worth because you used it for its job.
Yeah.
And sadly, plastic as a material, even if it's recycled, which sadly it probably won't be because it's something like 95% of plastics in America is not recycled.
Oh gosh.
So, the system that we have kind of celebrated, recycle, you were like, I grew up as a kid, like that's a great good thing. And now we're like, well, that's not a good thing. And I've just been doing that my whole life, maybe piously thinking like I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So, sadly the system cannot keep up with the amount that we are using. That's why recycling doesn't work. The waste management systems like cannot keep up. And
keep up with all the mass of everything.
The population is just like exploding. Our consumption is just exploding. And with that then single use, when it's been used, even if it was raw new plastic or if it had been recycled before it had been your bottle, it's always going to lose the, plastic, unlike other materials, will always degrade. So there's only so many times something can even be recycled and it's lost its properties to even hold something, So that is a not a closed loop cycle, And when you're thinking about, I guess you always just got to think of like a circular economy and a circle. Like if you think of everything you interact with is a circle, you've got to complete the circle every time you pick something up. And single-use plastics has completely exploded my kind of sudden sort of awareness of so many other things I consume. I can't suddenly just think about my single-use plastics and not then be like, oh wait, where does that go when I've finished with it? So I think it's really just about, in all things, where did this, in the same way we think about that of like the food we eat or the products we put on our skin, like, it's all, where does it come from? Where's it going? It's just closing those loops. I think has been really interesting for me to sort of like get a handle on it.
What we consume and why we consume and how it also consumes us in a way.
For sure. And not to be so entitled to think like, I'm going to put something in a trash can and like, bye, my job's done with it. Like, think about the trash collector. What even kind of life do they lead? And like, what is it like being just around everyone's trash? And like, then where is that going to? And like, is my recycling recycled? Do I even know what the numbers on the bottom of a recycling thing means? I mean, like all plastics have different numbers, and are they actually recycled in your neighborhood or not? And like, where do you know have you been to a landfill? Like, where is that? Like, just even visualizing that journey of something is like super beneficial to make you realize how impactful one small quick choice is.
Right.
Like all the time we're making choices, and I think we just need to slow down. Like, oh, I'm just going to grab this. I feel like that's a very American phrase as well, which is funny because in England, and that's changing, like everything's to go and to grab in England as much as it is now here, but it very much stemmed from that kind of American fast food sort of mentality, or just like things on the go. And it's like just stopping to be like, do you need to grab that coffee in a plastic cup and a straw, or actually could you just wait till you get home to have coffee? Or like, oh, I'm really thirsty, I need water. Like, I think you'll be fine. You can just wait till you get home.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just in those moments of being like, realizing the impact that small choices all the time are making. And then on the flip side, realizing that when you start shifting those small choices to more positive, lower impact choices, they can be as incredibly kind of altering to this planet as the bad ones. And I think
right.
That's why
to
always
tip the balance.
Exactly. And realize that in a world, sadly, where so much is about what we buy and consume rather than maybe kind of who we vote for, like, I think, you know, you realize then that there's a lot of power in your wallet. Even to choose not to buy something is power. You know, you don't have to spend that money, or like you don't have to, or spend it on something else and like promote things that are helpful. And I think with the minute, you know, in a sad sense, if we are just data, essentially, we can be good data, like shifting the fashions and patterns. And I think the thing that honestly gets me most frustrated and at a loss with these choices and these shifts is like, until there's true access to all these lower impact things, like what kind of real systemic impact and inclusion can we make?
Right.
And that's what really frustrates me and gets me down and makes me realize all the time how privileged I am to make a choice to carve time out to go somewhere to buy produce that I know I can buy without single-use plastics on it. Like, it is a privilege to live in a state of California and go to a farmer's market and buy produce. Like, that is a luxury. And it's like, until we begin to think about the food deserts that exist in South LA, in LA, where people have so many miles to even get an apple, a fresh produce vegetable that is not processed packet of chips and soda, like, how can we even, like, we haven't done our work until we've like fully allied with people who don't have the access to it, because otherwise, like, we can be raising the vibration of our group and we're all really into it, but we're all just like singing to a choir, really. You know, we all know, we're like, yeah, I'm doing it too, like in our own way. Even you saying like, you know, I'm really making the effort to reduce my use, but like even that, we're like in a bubble talking to one another.
Yeah, totally.
Because like
so many people are like just making
do that. Whereas like for a lot of people, it's like, you know, that's not even just getting the food and eating the food is the biggest thing.
Let alone like the organic food or
what it's packaged in. I mean, you know, so I think, and I guess that's the next level and stage and space I feel like I'm in now, is like, I feel like I've done the work on slowing down my habits. I mean, I do not live zero waste at all. And I have a high respect for those who can. But now I'm like, okay, this is all great that I'm doing this. But like, what about others? And what about people who are like in my city?
Totally.
Who can be my neighbor and not be doing something. So that's now a really interesting space I'm in, and know that it's something to be very sensitive and aware of. I think we can instantly just have our own lens on the world.
Oh gosh, I'm catching myself doing that lately. And you had this event in the summer, which was so inspiring to me. It was with Wastewatch. Tell us about Wastewatch.
Yeah, sure. So Wastewatch is a group I started about a year and a half ago with my friend Georgia Stockwell. And we basically just felt really uninformed about issues we really cared about. And we're like, in the environmental space. And we were like, if we knew more things about certain subjects, maybe we could take like better action or advocate for the right things. And so it came from a space of wanting to learn, and again, a space of wanting to do it in a community and with other people. And so we started a group, and it's first started as every month, and it was just too difficult to organize. But now it's evolved to we do about 4 or 5 a year. And we create a panel of speakers who are kind of in that world of the topic we decide to do. So the previous topic was titled "Don't Flush That," and it essentially was about all the kind of micro nano sort of toxins that end up in our systems, be that because we flush it down the toilet, we wash it through the shower, through the kitchen sink, through the storm water rushing, you know, the runoff of the drains, and essentially just thinking about where does it all go, you know, and really understanding that bigger picture. And then this next one that we have next week is all on, it's quite a big, broad topic, but regenerative agriculture, soil health.
Oh, cool.
Food waste. And again, going back to what I was talking about, food justice and access to food. So it's a big topic. And it's just been a really enjoyable experience that has had no goal in terms of like, I have no idea where it's gone. And it's just been this naturally evolving thing. And it's just like grown and spread of the different people that have come. And we've been so grateful for the people who have given their time to come and speak on the panels. And it's just been really nice. And people have just loved sitting for an hour and being informed, I think, rather than going to an event to like stand around and be like, why are we here? And what are we moving forward? It's just been, just information essentially. And just like, again, finding friends and allies together to like do things with, because it's easier to do something with someone else. We have a Instagram, Wastewatch LA, and we post the invites for the panels and talks. And so that's Wastewatch.
I'm definitely going to be there. I'm so excited. Yeah, I realized that, again, thinking that I knew what I was doing, that I just didn't even think twice about these like tiny contact lens in my eye. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been wearing glasses since I was, 14. I'm doing the math in the middle of this thing. How many contact lenses have I flushed down the toilet or put down the sink?
Yeah. But again, in those moments, like, who are you to know? I think with all things, I'm like, we didn't know any better because that's what we just assumed, which is also like no judgment, but that's, fine upon yourself, like not to judge yourself in that moment, but just to be like, wow, great, thankful that I've learned that. I mean, essentially what I pulled away from that panel was like, unless it's been through your body, like don't flush it down the toilet.
Yes, completely.
Like essentially.
And also be careful of what you also put in your body.
Yeah,
because
in your
what
body,
they're saying about people with drugs and like.
Oh yeah, I mean the sort of toxicity of pharmaceutical drugs and plastics in the water.
Oh god.
And also to think like we are part of the water system, like by being in existence.
Well, our bodies are, what's the
it's like 70% water? I don't know.
I always forget.
But we are
something high percentage.
Yeah, or people who are like, oh, well, I only drink bottled water or something. And I was like, well, A, you don't, because you're consuming water through your skin when you're showering and, all these different things. And I think actually the flip side of that is like, bottled water is less regulated than the water coming out of your tap. Yeah. So it's like, and again, goes back to access. Like I'm very aware that you could say to someone like single-use plastic water bottles are bad. And they might say, well, actually in the town I live, we literally can't drink the water because it is so toxic. So it's like, how do you straddle this topic? Because for some communities that is the cleanest source of water, and like they don't care that it's wrapped in plastic.
They're just glad it doesn't kill them.
Exactly. And so it's like, and so it's like being aware, I think, of like the language in which we use. And again, this is something that I am like every day learning to be more sensitive around this very complicated issue.
So this kind of brings up this conversation around consumption versus nourishment. And this is something that's coming up for me. And I was having dinner with a girlfriend the other night, and she has two young girls who are in their teens, and I have other friends with children who are younger than that. And there's kind of this heavy realization, especially with like the younger generations. There's also this idea of like, we don't know if we even have a future. For you, when you hear that, like what for you gives you hope? Like what gives you a sense of, light and nourishment? And also like, how would you share that with like younger generations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the young generations now, honestly, I don't feel like they need much imparting of knowledge from us.
Right,
like I feel like they're this like new wave that is coming through that is so hyper aware of the kind of the falseness and ego that has been attached to social media. Like they are literally a generation that are coming through and they're like disinterested in it because they're like, that's not real. We want to be hanging out with each other and climbing trees and doing stuff. And I think that I find a lot of hope just in them. And I feel like
naturally.
Yeah. And I think there was a time, I think we just being on the cusp of like very much having a childhood that wasn't about iPhones and iPads and,
Amazon.
If you consumed something, you went and sat in a movie theater and you watched it, or you had TV, or So I feel lucky that I was on like that side, and then there was a void of a few generations, which I think have been massively affected by it. But I think the youth now, kind of as old as sort of 16, 17, are so with it and so on it, and so kind of open with how they're sort of living and feeling in this kind of like boundaryless way, but also having boundaries of like calling people out and being like, no, like, you know, whether or not that's, but I think in terms of like thinking about, do we have a future? I think feeling this idea that like we had more of us behind than we do in front of us, which is like maybe again a bit of a morbid like image to be at this point on this like timeline,
right? To think
but I was always really interested in like the mystery of then what lay beyond us. Like I was always so fascinated by like what I didn't understand, and like,
I mean that's a film.
And so that's why I love sci-fi and horror, because it goes to those shadows and darknesses and unknowns. And I think it's very heartbreaking to realize that we're literally bringing on our own extinction. But at the same time,
maybe that's the best thing.
Maybe it's the best thing if we truly if we're truly advocating for these things because we love the rocks and soil and trees that we're surrounded by, then like if we truly love them, then we would understand and know that like maybe it's best we left and they had it back again. Like in a real like out there understanding of the big cycles. So there's that side of me that really is like, actually maybe it's fine and we're meant to go, and like there's a whole nother chapter coming for this world. And then the other half of me is like clinging on to it all and hoping that we can turn it around. And I think we can, and I'd prefer to be living trying to do that than I would not, and just be like, well, what can I do, and just like throw the towel in. Like I want to participate in something that I genuinely really love and care for. Again, I think children like know, and I don't know what I feel about children like myself. I mean,
do you want to have children in your life? That's kind of a little personal, but
I guess I was always just like had this assumption that like I would like to be for sure, but I also am aware that you can be a mother in many other ways too.
In so many ways.
I think also just in terms of like what's ahead of me, I don't know. And like I'm really excited by, as we're really disrupting the systems, like last week was Climate Week, and you know, it's like 7 million people were mobilized around the world to get on the streets. And granted, this isn't the beginning of the environmental movement. Like this happened before and it didn't change anything. You know, this isn't new. And like people have been, you know, at the front lines of protecting the environment since like we came and colonized all of, you know, the different countries. So this is not like a new dialogue, but I think it's exciting to feel like, wow, what disruption is happening now that is going to shake the core of these systems that like aren't really serving us anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to happen. That kind of wake up call needs to happen to really like shift things on the systemic way they need to. So it's kind of a mysterious, weird time we're living in. I feel like we're on the edge of something, I hope.
The unknown. I think that's your Sagittarius rising. Adventure.
It may be.
So
I'm always trying to understand my Sagittarius rising.
Bonnie is Aquarius with Sag rising and Pisces moon. And that's why the Pisces moon, you're so
I'm an emotional puddle.
With the Aquarius, and that's that quest for the knowledge.
Yeah, and I think that what I always understand as Aquarius is this kind of like eagle kind of floating above stuff, just like taking it in and like having thought but never knowing really, like, I don't know. Or that's like, I think I'm a projector. I need to do that.
Oh, are you? I was going to say, I think you're a projector too.
And which makes sense to me. I'm not like going out there and I'm just like putting out the energy and hopefully it will come back.
And your practice of the slowness and also loosening the grip. I was going to say, what would be, so to speak, your last meal on Earth?
Oh, my last meal on Earth would probably be, sorry, Billy's eating my hand. So his last meal on Earth is my hand. My last meal on Earth would probably be like, honestly, beans on toast with like grated cheese. That's like something my mum would make me. She used to call it a cheesy beano, but like slices of toast toasted with like Heinz baked beans and grated cheese on top.
Oh my gosh, I love
that would be like soothing. I don't know what. Every day I'm like, oh, and then now all I'm doing is thinking about food, and I want to throw in every other meal. But yeah, I don't know. I'm always comfort is like simple. And again, like going back to those things of like being easy on yourself. Mm-hmm. Like most things that my body is best with are the things I ate when I was a kid.
Isn't that so interesting?
Like steam, like we ate just like really clean vegetables, rice, potatoes, just like most thing we ever put on things was like olive oil, salt, pepper, rosemary. Like, you know, everything was like super like simple. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you cook though? You're a great cook.
Yeah, I love cooking. I mean, it's like the one thing I actually do and not think about everything else. It's like my surfing, meditation, like cooking, hiking, walking Billy, like the only things that take me out of like my story and self and things.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again for being here with us today. And for Wastewatch, you can find on Instagram.
Yeah, Wastewatch LA.
And then where do we find more about you and when your movies come out?
Yeah. So my Instagram is This Is Be Wright, and I will share movies as they come out. And I mean, all my work, if you want to watch any of my films, is bonbonlumiere.com, and you'll find all my work there.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
As a final note for our listeners, watch out for Rustic Cafe LA, a pop-up curated by Bonnie and our dear friend Emily Eisen. All proceeds benefit Supermarket, a low-cost organic grocery which services low-income communities in Los Angeles. Supermarket operates weekly, providing 100% organic produce and makes health and healing available to the communities which need it most. Because everyone deserves access to organic food. Bonnie and Emily will be selling a selection of homemade baked goods, coffee, tea, and other delights at their next pop-up on December 12th. Follow their Instagram at Rustic Cafe LA for the confirmed location and updates. As a warning, I devoured the jar of plum jam they gifted me from their last pop-up. It is heavenly, wholesome, naturally sweet, and most importantly, made and shared with love. Thank you for being here and tuning in to this episode of Soundfood. It is an honor to share this space with you. Have a beautiful week.